I'm Dr. Nathaniel Chin, and you're listening to Dementia Matters, a podcast about Alzheimer's disease. Dementia Matters is a production of the Wisconsin Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. Our goal is to educate listeners on the latest news in Alzheimer's disease research and caregiver strategies. Thanks for joining us. Welcome back to Dementia Matters. Dementia is a condition typically associated with older individuals, around their 60s or 70s. However, a far less mentioned type of dementia is younger-onset dementia, which is diagnosed in people under the age of 65, sometimes as young as in a person in their 30s or 40s. This is the type of dementia that the nonprofit organization Lorenzo's House specializes in. Their goal is to reduce the stigma surrounding younger onset dementia, improve the quality of care that those with younger onset dementia can receive, and empower youth and families living with this diagnosis. Joining me today from Lorenzo's House is Diana Cose and Patti Lefleur. Diana founded Lorenzo's House in 2021 after her husband was diagnosed with younger onset dementia. She has a master's degree in educational administration from Loyola University in Chicago, as well as over 30 years of experience as an educator. Patti is also a former care partner, supporting her mother, Linda, who was diagnosed with younger onset dementia. She serves as the program's lead at Lorenzo's House and is also a certified dementia practitioner, a community educator for the Alzheimer's Association, and a former elementary educator of over 10 years. Diana and Patti, welcome to Dementia Matters.
Hi, welcome. We are so grateful to be here. Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Diana, let's begin with you. What exactly is younger onset dementia?
Well, like you just said a moment ago, younger onset dementia is dementia that symptoms show up before age 65. And we're finding that there is a 200% uptick, according to Blue Cross Blue Shield, most in the last decade, of those diagnosed between ages 35 and 65. The Alzheimer's Association has talked about somewhere between 220 and almost 700,000 people living with younger onset dementia. And that could be Alzheimer's, younger onset Alzheimer's, Lewy body, FTD. And if we look at those numbers globally, we are talking that 4 million people today are impacted by and walking around with a diagnosis of younger onset dementia. And we'll get into this soon, but we're not talking about those who are undiagnosed or misdiagnosed. So people don't know that so often, too often, our primary care physicians do not ask the question. Maybe it's a cognitive issue. There's a data point that says that something like 70% of those who have been diagnosed with younger onset dementia were given a antidepressant the year before. So younger onset dementia impacts hundreds and thousands of us, and we're kind of kept in the shadows. There's a stigma around it. We're here.
It's a powerful answer, Diana. One of the things that sticks out to me right away is the use of the word we, because certainly dementia affects not only the person with the symptoms, but the spouse and the family, which I know you're going to speak to, both of you, in just a few minutes. But I also want to comment on the fact that as a clinician, right, someone in a memory clinic, it's really hard to diagnose cognitive impairment earlier in the disease, right, in 30s and 40s, because we tend not to think of dementia in someone young. We tend to think of mental health. We tend to think of other conditions. And so you're right. There is sort of this, I would even say, a stigma. We think of other things because we don't really want to think of dementia, right? No, it can't be that. In addition, when it comes to this idea of younger onset dementia, there's a confusion about, well, is it that their symptoms happen before the age of 65? Is it that they have to have a diagnosis by a specialist before the age of 65? How do we actually define this term? And so, you've said, and which is my understanding too, the symptoms really happen before. All of this, of course, is semantics, because the most important thing is we talk to people about whether or not they're having changes. But I think what is so important is really that the people talk to their provider about what they're experiencing, that we break the stigma of what people are experiencing as far as their thinking changes. And it can actually be mood changes like you just described, people having being put on medications, and that providers themselves are really thinking about this because many providers don't know. And so I'm really glad the two of you are here. I was one of those providers that really didn't have a good understanding, even though my own father was affected by this. And so I had to do a lot of research prior to coming on this presentation to make sure. And I just wanted to say that I saw that study that you just referenced. The other thing that I think providers really struggle with is we often confuse younger onset with early onset, the genetic condition. And maybe we'll get into that a little bit later. But just as a teaser for our listeners, there is a difference. And so before we go on to that, Diana, what exactly is Lorenzo's House? What inspired you to start this organization? What were the gaps that you were seeing in the care and the resources available to you and your family that you had hoped to fill?
Yeah, and just to add one more point, when we use the term stigma, or when I was referencing it, the stigma is that society thinks that dementia is an older person's diagnosis. It is not anymore an older person's diagnosis, and we need to pay attention because we're truly left in the shadows, families like ours. So, Lorenzo's House is a labor of big, big love. I got lucky with love. I found and met my husband, Lorenzo, the night I moved to Chicago. And we fell in love. And we had, about 25 years later, had what we call a diagnosis of the family. Our sons were 9 and 13 when brain change showed up in our home. And we use that term brain change. We teach that term brain change. And Alzheimer's was not in our family. I knew nothing about this. We were going to be the first family to beat it. And I realized that there was nothing for us. Our family profile, younger, with dementia, with young children. And at the time, my world has been in urban education in Chicago, and I leveraged my background and as a founder of a network of public schools. We grew this network of schools from 40 students to 2,300 students, and from two teachers to 250 staff over 5 campuses, and that learning about growth and learning about having sort of an entrepreneurial spirit, I pivoted. I made a pivot, and I thought, well, maybe I can build a place for families like mine. And that was the beginning of the idea of Lorenzo's House. Lorenzo's House, we are a virtual organization. We are impacting families in 48 states and 16 countries. We are only 4 years old, people. Goes to show you, build it and they will come. And we do two things: we heal in community, and we advocate for dementia justice. And it is, it's a place that's healing me personally, and I think is a place where people find family, find sisterhood, find brotherhood, because when we find each other, when we have this connection of someone who walks our similar journey, we immediately feel a sense of empowerment, a sense of relief, a sense of I am not alone. And you can't measure that. It's hard to find that on a metric, but I'm telling you, it is everything. So I would love to segue to Patty, who's a daughter of Alzheimer's, to her beautiful mom, Linda, and also is our programs lead, to talk about our 3 pillar programs. Am I taking over the interview by doing that?
Diana, I was like, I know you're in charge of the Renzo's House, but this is my podcast after all. And so thank you for sharing your personal story. And I know Patty's going to share her story, but Patty, welcome. And please share how you came to the Renzo's House and how you are involved in the 3 pillar program.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me and for this opportunity to be a voice of so many other sons and daughters of younger onset dementia. My beautiful mom, Linda, walked with younger onset dementia, and I was looking for community for many years, a place where others understood pieces of my journey. And I, 9 years into my journey, found Lorenzo's House and ended up in a Zoom room with Diana and finally felt like I had this home, a place where people really understood what it means to be younger, walking with brain change in your family. And so I became part of the organization as a daughter myself. And then flash forward now, 2.5 years later, I am our programs lead. And so, as Diana said, we do two things in three ways. So, we heal in community and we advocate for dementia justice, but we offer three virtual pillar programs for our families. Our first pillar program is our match. So we have a one-to-one care to care connection with a peer who understands. So we'll connect two daughters in Chicago who are walking this journey and live 10 minutes from each other, but don't know a single other person in their community that's walking. And now they have a lifelong friend. They have a person that they can text in this moment of crisis, this person that they can reach out to, a person that they can bring their mama together with. And there's just this shared understanding. So we have our match. We also have our clubs, which are our virtual spaces. We offer a light lounge for male care partners, a bright brunch for female care partners. But really, what makes us unique is the spaces for sons and daughters. So we offer a light club 3 times a month for the sons and daughters, for young people as young as 4, all the way up to 35 plus. We have a 4 to 7-year-old group that uses picture books to talk about brain change in Papa Bear and what that looks like and how it could connect to the experience in their home. We have a children's group for those that are 8 to 12 who really want to come together and play and make friends and build community. We have a 13 to 17-year-old group that's really thinking about those social aspects. How do I begin to tell one friend or one teacher or my basketball coach that there's brain change in my home and it is making my journey a little bit different, and how can I feel seen? And then our 18 plus group, they just really lead that space. They come with questions and collective wisdom and tools and strategies and just lean into each other in community. We have a shine on space for children, teens, and young adults whose parent have passed. And then the really exciting thing that happens once a year is we have our virtual youth summit. Last year, we had over 200 young people from across the globe who come together and lead the day. They are leading the sessions alongside neurologists and speech language pathologists and occupational therapists, and building community and healing in this connection, but also having an opportunity to lead and raise their collective wisdom in really powerful ways. So those are our three pillar programs. And then really, one of the big things that has come out of it is this idea of dementia justice. We have these spaces to heal in community, but how are we advocating for a more inclusive and compassionate world that understands and has some awareness of the journey that we are walking as younger families?
That's just absolutely incredible. Very comprehensive, very thoughtful from the age spectrum that you describe. Wow. Well, then thank you for sharing that. And I imagine that's on your website the way you described it too, Patty. So that for our listeners, if they want to get more details about that.
Definitely, you can always come to our website, and all of our youth initiatives and our care partner programs are all listed on our website. And the one thing I didn't name too is, when a family reaches out to Lorenzo's house, every family matters. Every conversation matters. When they reach out, a person, either myself or one of my trained volunteers that are called lighthouses, reaches back out to every family. So they are welcomed into our family by a person. We get in a Zoom room like I did with Diana. Now I have this opportunity to do that with other sons and daughters across the globe. And they hear pieces of my story, they share pieces of their story, and we connect them to both resources within Lorenzo's house that make sense for them and out externally. We have partners in this space and we're sharing our collective knowledge and wisdom, but also it's more of this When you reach out to Lorenzo's house, you are welcomed with open arms and compassion and love. And there is just this shared understanding. When I say, I walked this journey with my mom, there's nodding, there's this beautiful connection that happens because all of our volunteers are people that have walked this journey or are walking this journey. So you're immediately seen when you walk through the doors of Lorenzo's house, even virtually.
And along those lines, so you've both had these unique experiences as care partners, caregiving for a parent and a partner, respectively. So, how are those experiences different from each other when discussing caregiving for younger onset dementia? And how is the family caregiving experience different compared to caregiving for someone who's diagnosed with dementia over the age of 65?
I think one of the biggest things for me walking this journey as a young adult is that many of the important milestones were disrupted. So, the brain change that was happening with my mom was happening during a time when I was experiencing some of my biggest life moments, right? I'm graduating from college, I'm getting married, I'm navigating the early stages of my career, the moments where I needed my mom and my best friend, but she was a different version of herself. She couldn't be that person that I could call when I needed advice, or that I could lean on as a shoulder to cry on, or could even celebrate those moments with me. And so there was these added layers of grief, anticipatory grief, that also occurred during these really big life moments. And I was shifting in my role from daughter to carer and what that looked like during really important milestones that didn't look the way that either of us had planned. And I think something that Diana said too, that about like, how is the family caregiving experience different, is that there's more of an understanding as a society when someone is in their 70s or 80s and walking with brain change, but the stigma for a young family can be so heavy. There were many times on my journey that people told me, even though my mom had a diagnosis, that she was too young to have dementia. She was too young to have brain change. And so I was constantly having to justify my experience to others. So the milestone disruption and then this justification and the stigma makes the younger onset journey so different.
Thank you for sharing that, Patty. Diana, how about your experience?
Thank you, Patty. You're so beautiful. Every word you say. I guess, as a mid to late 40s when brain change showed up in our home. And when I look back, it is such a complicated and complex condition. And we use the word condition intentionally, not disease at Lorenzo's house. It is, and it gets you emotional to look back and think about being a caregiver to brain change is different in that it's not papa anymore, right? It's and one of the things I always think about is having kids and raising kids. Patty, you beautifully talk about the milestones in your world as a younger person. As a mom, you have these milestones. You've got a 10-year-old and a 14-year-old, and what they want to do is be teenage sons. They want to play basketball and they want to hang out and make mistakes, and the sort of repeated, I guess, trauma that takes place in a home is long, right? It's long and it's years. And I think that, one of the things we would always say, and I learned it from Tessa, who's an amazing social worker at U Chicago Medicine, is it's, when your sons are trying to make sense of things, trying to make meaning of this, all of us, while we're also trying to get through our day, one of the mantras we had is that it's the condition, it's not papa. And that helped. So I think the biggest piece, I always focus on our sons. Like, I think I always go there. I think witnessing them losing their dad the way they did, it's unimaginable, and it's families need help and they need each other. They need to find each other. Our sons didn't know anyone who shared their similar journey until they were 16 and 19 or something like that, when we found Lorenzo's house. So as a professional, or as a wife, or then a mom and a professional, there's those different sort of identities, then you have this primary caregiver identity as well. And you're trying to balance those, and you all of a sudden wake up and you're the breadwinner, and then you wake up one day and you're like, wait a minute, I think I'm kind of a single mom now. So all of those pieces you're carrying at this time where the isolation's so thick because no one gets it. No one gets it. And people want to help. I guess, when I think about our caregiving journey, what I think about is we need each other. Families need each other. The younger families need each other.
Well, one, I want to say thank you both for sharing this. I mean, I can hear the emotion, and I don't know when your loved ones passed, but I can still feel it. And our listeners can't see you too, and we don't record the video as I told you guys ahead of time, but I can see it too. And it's obvious that you still have this emotion, and I suspect you funnel that emotion and passion into your conversations to the families that contact you, and in the answers that you provide when they ask questions. And I imagine there are lots of questions when people contact you. And so for our listeners who are thinking about this, perhaps they are families of younger onset dementia, cases. What are the concerns or questions that they come to you with when they first reach out, that they're searching for help? Are they similar to ones that you're describing? Or what are you seeing when they first connect with you?
I think that, the big thing, and it echoes what Diana just said, is that we often hear this message that there is no place for the sons and daughters and for the young people. So we have families reaching out approximately over 50 inquiries a month, and they are reaching out with young children who are 4 or 7 or 9 and 10, and they don't know a single other young person that is walking with a parent with brain change, and they are looking for community and connection and ways to even begin to have this conversation about such a complex condition in their home with their children. And they're looking for this place for their young people to have others that understand and to learn about the condition, but also a place for them to just have fun and make friends. And that's what our spaces become. They become these places where these 9-year-olds show up for each other in ways that other people will never show up for them. And they have this shared understanding. When members of our community, when their parent has passed, the other members of the community send notes of love. They share their email addresses. We have 10-year-old boys sending messages of love to other 10-year-old boys, telling them if they'd like to connect, that here's their email address, or here's some words of love or wisdom. And so the message that we continually get when families reach out is they just feel like there is no place for them, and there is no place for their young members of their family, and we become that safe space for them to land.
And Diana, how about for you? What is something that you see as people are engaging more and more in Lorenzo's house? Like, what is a trend that you see, whether it's questions or concerns? What are you noticing?
I think what we're learning at Lorenzo's house is that this being sort of a wife of young onset, right? Or a daughter of Alzheimer's, or a daughter of young, again, it's one part of us, but it's a really big one, and it shapes you. And we're finding that even when you've walked the journey like our family has with my Lorenzo having been diagnosed and then passing just 2 years ago, what we find is that the journey continues. And I think that's what we're learning, is that this journey, it is a part of your world. It is a part of our son's world now. Not only what their experience was, but what their future might be. So what we're finding is that, and it's powerful, and it's where this dementia justice piece came up. In the first couple of years of founding Lorenzo's house, it was about, let's get together, let's connect, one-on-one or in group. Now what's happening is that there's this sense of people want to fight a little bit. They want to fight back. They want to advocate for families who are walking this journey, and we don't want to be left in the shadows anymore. And so our young people are literally building out this next generation of younger onset dementia. It's a next gen YOD project, which is developing youth leadership, because our young people understand this condition more intimately than anyone. They've seen it, they've experienced it, they've had to walk it and learn it now. They should be at the table. They should be at the World Health Organization speaking. They should be at the Wisconsin Alzheimer's conference this summer. They should be everywhere, and they should be that voice. Lorenzo's House is unapologetically for younger families, and that is really rare to say that. And we made that really hard decision 6 months in. It's not for everybody. And whoever says it's not for everybody, what we have, because there's nothing for us. So I think that's what we're learning, is this side of, we're kind of building out, and we can talk about it in a bit kind of where we're going, but it's this idea of, advocating, and who better to do it than our kids, to normalize the conversation, to dismantle the stigma that surrounds not only younger families, but everyone. And it's not so cool. People don't want to talk about dementia. It's taken how long for it to get on anybody's agenda. So I think that's what what we're learning at Lorenzo's House.
And you have to advocate. And I think one of those tables, and of course I'm biased being in the position that I'm in, but one of those tables is going to be research. And when I was preparing for this podcast, but also for prior presentations where I discussed young onset dementia, there's not a lot of research. There's building research, but right now it's just looking at, well, how many cases of young onset dementia are there? And in those very few studies, everyone is surprised by how many cases. A lot of them have been in European countries where they have easier access to those statistics, but they were surprised by how many cases actually were there. And it just makes me recognize that you don't know what you're dealing with until you look for it, right? And so you guys are doing great work in raising that awareness, but we do really need to study this. And Diana, what you just said though about once it happens, it doesn't just go away. And as you guys know, in Wisconsin, we have the Wisconsin Registry for Alzheimer's Prevention Study, a wonderful study. It's been going on for over 2 decades. But those participants, they're affected. They're older. This is late onset and young onset, but they're there because they're affected. Their family members parents had Alzheimer's, and so they want to contribute. And that's what you're looking at. They want to find ways. You guys found your ways through helping families, and research is one way, and so is what you're doing. But you have to advocate. So I applaud you for what you're doing. But you're right. Having that direction of, I love that, Diana, unapologetically, this is for younger onset. I think that's terrific. I did want to address an earlier question that I brought up, because I think before I move on to what's the future of Lorenzo's House, the confusion I think that still exists is younger onset is not the same thing as early onset genetically linked Alzheimer's disease. And Diana, when I first met you and you and I had talked about this, I had that confusion because I said, oh, you know, I don't see that many cases of early onset. And that's because I thought you were referring to individuals in the population less than 5% that had the genetic mutation. And there are 3 particular genetic mutations where if you get one copy, it's called an autosomal dominant, you develop Alzheimer's disease. And for those that know what I'm referring to, a great PBS special showed the population in Colombia where they develop it in their 20s, 30s, 40s. But that's not what we're talking about. And when I did the research for this, only 11% of young onset cases of dementia actually carry a genetic mutation. And while Alzheimer's is the most common cause of young onset dementia, it's only roughly 50% in some of those studies I was referring to in the European groups. And so there's so many other cases that we don't yet understand. There's so many other factors that are leading to this, and we need to know what those are and what the research is. But so yeah, there's so much that needs to be understood about it. And so hopefully you guys are raising the awareness, and the young people, the people that are so empowered and invested will really push for this.
Yeah. No, and we appreciate you in the medical space too, because we're not clinical, right? We're not medical. We're about the care side, the home side. But we appreciate you elevating this conversation, because our families, the path to diagnosis is exhausting. It's multi-year, it's multi-doctor, it's multi-diagnosis, and it doesn't have to be, right? It doesn't have to be. Can we train our physicians to just naturally ask the question, could this be cognitive impairment? Sometimes they're not even, not believed. So
Well, we'll get there. We'll get there. And speaking of the future, though, so Diana, I do want to know, as Lorenzo's House enters its 5th year, Where do you see it going? How do you hope the organization, as well as the whole field of younger onset dementia research, care, where do you see it developing over the next 5 years?
The future, and Patty, you chime in too. The future of Lorenzo's house looks so bright, and I think to start with, the mantra at Lorenzo's house is that our youth, our young people, our sons and our daughters and their families are our compass. Any growth that has happened has come from the voices of our community and our needs. And as I was saying before, we're moving in this place toward for building out advocacy. And so this beautiful concept of, our tagline at Lorenzo's house is "We bring light." And so light is everywhere. And it's a beautiful metaphor. And we are developing our Light Academy. And our academy is going to be, imagine this academy is virtual, and it has 3 schools in it. And the first school, the first sort of learning module, is to be a volunteer at Lorenzo's house. And we will grow Lorenzo's house because we are growing an army of volunteers, people with lived experience who are greeting you, who are greeting the next family in the lighthouse, those who've walked this journey and who are paving the way for those who come behind us. That this is an army, a beautiful love army and light army. So that first strand is about all these beautiful trainings of what it means to be a lighthouse, what it means to be a facilitator of our light club, what it means to host a screening and to guide our 14-minute short film and our screening. It's a beautiful, this is strand 1. So this is our ambassador sort of volunteer strand. And the next strand is this idea of advocacy and youth leadership and this next generation of youth leadership so that we can effectively prepare our young people, whether they're in college or they're working or they're in high school and they want to on the side be a youth leader and then attend conferences and be that spokesperson and join me on Dr. Chin's next podcast. That's this army, and change and figure out what are we advocating for and where are we going to advocate and what does this look like. So that's this youth piece. And what's really beautiful is that's kind of intersecting. It seems like of the 6 full-time staff members at Lorenzo's house, 4 of them are educators. And so we get how to build, right? We get how to scaffold lessons and build up programs and think ahead and really give the reins to young people, right? And so we get how to do that. And then the last piece, which is evolving, and it's super powerful and it's really cool, is this idea of being a young onset dementia informed community, a young onset dementia informed clinic, a young onset dementia informed hospital. And that is building out webinars, building out professional opportunities for those in whether it's a senior living space or to a hospital. What does it mean to be a young onset informed, Lorenzo's house inspired organization where you have it top of mind? And so this came because we feel, my goodness, we're learners, and we have this learner stance at Lorenzo's house. We're constantly learning because we get what's happening in the house, right? I am not an expert in any way. I'm an expert in my Lorenzo and what happened in our home, and hardly that, but that's what I know. That's what I bring. And so, but what we're finding is, my goodness, people are paying attention, right? From across state borders and from across country borders, people are paying attention. So we feel, my goodness, we need to store our information and our knowledge in really effective ways. And so we're excited about our Light Academy. That is the direction we're moving. It's this advocacy arm while we continue to heal in community, right? It's almost a trajectory of where a family, a son, a daughter has a path with Lorenzo's house. So that shines a little bit of light on it. Patty, would you add anything?
Yeah, Patty, I want you to build on that because I think a lot of our listeners are caregivers and they may actually be supporting someone diagnosed with younger onset dementia. And I think they're going to be inspired by what you both are saying. They're going to want to support this mission. So what are some ways that they could get involved or they could learn more and support the programs that you guys are talking about?
Yeah, thank you. Well, first of all, for those of you that are listening that are caregivers, Lorenzo's house is here for you. We welcome you to our Lorenzo's house family with open arms. Please go to our website, which will be linked in the show notes. And also, please just reach out. We welcome you. We see you. We are here for you in whatever way that looks like. And there's so much courage to reach out. So just know we will meet you with that courage, with open arms and a big heart. Other ways to get involved is just continue to introduce us to other families and partners and experts, opportunities like being here with you, Dr. Chin, where we get to share a little bit about our story and about our mission and what we're doing, allows us to reach our audacious goal of connecting with every family that is affected by younger onset dementia. It's always powerful to follow us on social media. We're on Instagram and LinkedIn and Facebook. Sign up for our newsletter. And then all of our programs are free for families. We don't charge $1 to any family. And so donating to our mission is so important and so valuable. It's how we reach families. So that's always a really beautiful way to help. And then, this, as Diana said, one of the schools of our Light Academy is being a volunteer. So we always welcome volunteer ambassadors to give their time and efforts in such meaningful ways. And just follow along, check out our website. We have a short film. We are going to be doing a premiere in March of our short film. And so we follow us along and join in on our screening of our short film.
With the Dementia Matters podcast, we do like to end with practical tips for some of our listeners. And as both of you are caregivers, have been caregivers, are in this space, are very passionate, I would ask for you to end today by giving a tip for those that are listening, that are looking for advice on what was useful or what has been useful for younger onset or older onset that you think was meaningful to you or has been meaningful for people that you've worked with when caring for a loved one who's going through this process.
I think that for me, the biggest piece that was so helpful was finding my village, find your community. So the people that I thought were going to show up for me were often the people that didn't show up for me. So finding the people in my life and in my community that could show up in really meaningful ways, whether that was a phone call or a text message or a silly meme from a friend, right? Just finding someone, even one other person that understands a piece of your journey can really help to lift some of the heaviness and help you know that you're not alone. Lorenzo's house is a resource in that space, but there are so many beautiful people out there that are walking this journey, and just know you are seen and supported. But find your community and lean in on them in such powerful ways.
Patty, that's an amazing answer. Diana, that's a tough one to follow.
I know. How do you ever follow this amazing woman? The first thing I would say is a tip. I don't know I guess it's a tip is if you have kids, right? Younger kids, under 18 particularly, or even in their 20s, try to connect them to Lorenzo's house, especially if you are a care partner male. We have found it is so hard for our care partner males to reach out. It's so hard to reach out anyway, right? I remember my journey and how hard it was to make that first call, like, I need help. And we're finding that we're getting like 95% of the people that we're supporting are care partner females. We need our men. And interestingly enough, women are being diagnosed more, right? So our care partner males, I speak to, you have kids, we are here for you. And it's such a trusting, safe space. So I would say pay attention, because I don't think I was as good as I could have been for my sons. I think that had we had a place to send our kids, or a place where our kids could land, that could have been a really beautiful thing. And the second thing I would say is, and this is more about the self-care is such a big word. It's such a big word, and it's become this thing. But I'll tell you, one of the things that got me through was finding intentional moments of light. And I had this metaphor that was constant in my mind. It was like I could have 120 seconds looking at the sun standing on the balcony of our condo or something, or having my cup of coffee, and for that short time, taking that 2 minutes and just really intentionally having that moment with yourself. If you do those little mini moments during the day, you can store up maybe 10 minutes or 7 minutes that is yours. And I found that to be something that sustained me.
Oh, well, that was beautiful. Thank you both. I've really enjoyed this conversation. It was very meaningful, and I hope our listeners feel the same way. But I've appreciated having you both on Dementia Matters today.
Mm, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Chin. We think the world of you.
Thank you for listening to Dementia Matters. Follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen, or tell your smart speaker to play the Dementia Matters podcast. Please rate us on your favorite podcast app. It helps other people find our show and lets us know how we're doing. If you enjoy our show and want to support our work, consider making a gift to the Dementia Matters Fund through the UW Initiative to End Alzheimer's. All donations go toward outreach and production. Donate at the link in the description. Dementia Matters is brought to you by the Wisconsin Alzheimer's Disease Research Center at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. It receives funding from private, university, state, and national sources, including a grant from the National Institutes on Aging for Alzheimer's Disease Research. This episode of Dementia Matters was produced by Amy Lambright Murphy and Kaylin Rowerdink and edited by Eli Gadbury. Our musical jingle is Cases to Rest by Blue Dot Sessions. To learn more about the Wisconsin Alzheimer's Disease Research Center, check out our website at adrc.wisc.edu. That's adrc.wisc.edu. And follow us on Facebook and Twitter. If you have any questions or comments, email us at dementiamatters@medicine.wisc.edu. Thanks for listening.